Film fans of YouTube, hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Josh, your movie apprentice, and today, well, I am looking at the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves movie. Thank you very much to Cineworld for putting it out as their secret screening this year. This, for me, was one of my top three most anticipated movies of the year. Not because I thought it was going to be the best film ever made, but because it's based on a game that I thoroughly fell in love with over that dark period between 2020 and 2021, and I still play it to this day, running two campaigns, and I play it in a couple of others. Whilst I definitely didn't expect this to be a groundbreaking fantasy movie, I expect it to be a full-on love letter to the fans, and I am happy to report on this occasion that the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves movie does that job really, really well. John Francis Daley and Johnathan Goldstein co-direct this piece, which follows the bard and barbarian who, after getting captured on a job go wrong, escape prison to get back the treasures that they stole previously from someone they once considered an ally, and they of course have to get a party together in order to achieve this goal. Now, the biggest highlight for me when it comes to this movie is that it embraces how silly it is. The effects in this, you could argue, look a little bit cheap, but it fully leans into the silly elements of Dungeons and Dragons. Like the characters and the monsters all look straight out of the monster manual, out of all the source books that they come out of, and hearing all these little nuggets of Dungeons and Dragons information getting dropped from factions like the Harpers to iconic character names like More Than Canaan to mentioning things like Baldur's Gate, for example. There is just nod after nod after nod that, while it is fan service, never feels like fan service because it is very much in this world and we're just getting to see it being brought to life in the biggest way possible. I'm not saying that every single Dungeons and Dragons player will like this movie. I'm going to say right now that all the little rules lawyers out there that have to nitpick the rules as written constantly are not going to be huge on this. Obviously, a big one is that the druid can turn to an owlbear constantly, which is something that they actually can't do in the source books themselves. But this film very much leans to that tried and true method of playing the game, which is the rule of cool. Now, performance wise, the standouts for me had to be Rege-Jean and Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant plays an absolute slimy character, but he has that charismatic nature about him that stole a lot of people's hearts when he was standing in these British rom coms. He brings the energy here and plays sort of like a mastermind rogue kind of character. He is so slimy, he is so gross, but you kind of love him for it, and that's another common thing when you play D&D is that you kind of love how shitty some of these BBEGs and bad guys can be. And Rege-Jean, he plays the paladin character in this, and for those who don't play the game, paladins are basically magical crusaders. They are given a task by God and they must conquer this fight consistently and will take on all evil. And they're usually played very serious and they're always trying to be the moral compass of the party. So seeing these other four complete disasters of people, even Doric, who is the most lawful out of the other four, she is still a little bit chaotic and embraces the mad energy. So seeing their dynamic bounce off this paladin character, it works really well and gives some of the funniest exchanges in the whole damn movie. Paladin is not in this as much. He effectively plays a DM NPC that's there to help out with a quest and give some lore information and some exposition dumps and move on. And the way that whole sequence plays out, especially its dynamic with Chris Pine's Bard character, works absolutely fantastically. Like I said, this film really embraces the silly nature of Dungeons and Dragons and uses it to its fullest. Michelle Rodriguez plays the barbarian character, and as much as I would love to have seen a little bit of the stereotypical rage that you get from a barbarian in this kind of game, she still does a fantastic job. Plays the low intelligence character, but still has some intelligent things to say, and very much just likes to take names, kick ass, and drink a little bit of ale, but having that deep, soft side about them that doesn't come out much apart from the people that they are close to, and she is really good in this. Chris Pine is a perfect choice to play the Bard character. I will have one complaint is the fact that the bard. You never really get to see any sort of bardic magic. There is maybe a little bit of bardic inspiration thrown in there, but not a whole lot of bards using their magic. 'Cause my first card I ever played was this bard, not the horny bard or whatever the big stereotype is, but just basically this takes no nonsense bard, and the support spells they can get from the bard class is absolutely fantastic. So I'd like to see a bit more of that. But seeing him being the party face and the mouthpiece worked fantastically, and it really leans into a lot of the D&D tropes, right down to the tragic backstory and just pouring all your heart out to these random characters. That is one of our first introductions to this character, and he does the job brilliant. Justice Smith as well plays a wild magic sorcerer, and sadly, unfortunately, he does not turn into a potted plant for rolling wild magic, which is a shame. But we do see elements of wild magic play in, and it is a lot of fun. I've actually got a player in one of my campaigns now that genuinely thinks they're a hero but knows the most basic of magic and nothing too far out there. And there was a scene involving this character that just reminds me of that. And I loved the exchange that he shares with Chris Pine as well. It's a really fun party dynamic. Honestly, there's not a single member of the party that I found annoying or didn't like. They all had their motives, they all had a common goal, and they're all a bunch of idiots. I think one of my favorite sequences wasn't even an action scene. Well, technically it was, but for me, I don't think it officially counts as an action scene. But it's basically a pseudo heist moment where you're seeing these little bits and bobs take place, going from one into the other, and where this film really shines for me is that as someone that plays the game, you can see the moments where you can almost hear the DM giving answers to different roles. There are several moments where things are going well, then something minor will happen. You're like, oh, that person must have done very crap on their role on this particular occasion, and having to do these little things to get out these small little hiccups and somehow still bullshit their way through the plan, because that is most of the tabletop game, is just bullshitting your way through a plan and hoping that you succeed. That is basically the game in a nutshell. And yes, we do get a dragon in a dungeon, and it's amazing and it is freaking glorious. It is a lot of fun, and just seeing these characters get brought into life. We see the Displacer Beast, we see gelatinous cubes, we see mimics straight out of the manuals. Glorious to see them, and the context of the party jumping into a gelatinous cube, which everyone's that plays the game saw in the trailer and thought, "What? Why?" The context for it is actually low key brilliant in terms of like the story itself, outside of all the D&Disms and just the dynamics and how the parties bounce off each other and come up with many different plans to try and achieve the goal that the party is trying to achieve. It is a very mid fantasy movie. Like, don't go in expecting it to be another big scale Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones esque kind of fantasy story. It is not that, and it never tries to be that. It gives a lot of Dungeons and Dragons lore, gives a very simple premise that is very by the numbers, right down to some predictable elements that unfortunately made some really emotional moments not work for me. But as a Dungeons and Dragons fan, this was everything that I could have hoped for. I would have liked to have seen a bit more spell casting from some of the classes and a bit more features from some of the classes as well. The only thing that really gets hammered home is the druid's wild shape, because everyone loves a little wild shape or two, which gives us also one of the best sequences in the whole damn movie. But as a fantasy film itself, and the stakes and the plot, it's goofy. It's not too serious, but Dungeons and Dragons isn't too serious anyway. So I would say those of you that will be going to watch this, don't expect this high. Well, it is high fantasy, but don't expect this super serious high fantasy. Expect something goofy and a bunch of idiots just bouncing off each other, trying to come up with plans to achieve little goals and big goals, and just bullshit their way to a satisfying conclusion, because that is genuinely what the game's about, and the film captures that marvelously. I hope that we do get some more Dungeons and Dragons movies, like maybe a bit more meta-ness about it, because there was not a single scene where we cut away to the actual actors at a table playing these characters. That would have been a great little stinger to have. But the way they poke fun at some spells, such as Speak with Dead, I wish they did something with Ascending Stones as well. That would have been a lot of fun. There's a lot of nitty gritty mechanical rules of the game that are very pedantic and in characters, like why does it work like that? Oh, it just works like that. That is a fantastic element of the film. But all in all, it was a good time for me. Not the greatest of the year, but it lived up to my expectations. Now, before I get into my grade, if you're liking what you're seeing on this channel, and now I am going to be back properly this time, feel free to drop a like, hit the subscribe button, and look forward to more reviews coming way quicker than they have been for the last nearly 200 days now. I do apologize for my lengthy break, but I am finally back, and of course, it was the Dungeons and Dragons movie that brought me back. For me, Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves is a tea that needs more sugar. So Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves. Tell me in the comments below, what is your favourite class to play in Dungeons and Dragons? And if you've never played it, do you think this film is going to encourage you to go out and look into getting into the hobby? I am very curious to see what effect this movie will have in terms of people jumping into the hobby itself. That's something I'm very looking forward to. But until next time, everybody, my name is Josh. I have been Movie Apprentice. And I'll see you all next time.